make a special trip for Dusty.
Yeah.
And you get to recognize Jackie Shannon tonight, which is going to be I'm just excited.
He's on the
about
board
that.
here, isn't
She,
he?
is it she?
She.
Yeah.
I know the name.
Yeah, the late Dr. Charlie Shannon was on the
Charlie,
board.
that's,
from the get-go.
yes.
And he did many things, and Jackie worked with him. And then when he passed away in the spring of 2002, then, the question was, where will Jackie fall in the advocacy? And rather than stepping back or staying the same, she just stepped it up another notch and has been carrying that mantle now for all these years. And of course, her two sons, Brian and Greg, incredibly supportive. So when you think about the Shannon family and a legacy of a family, it's pretty rich and pretty broad. And there's
Wow.
nobody who probably more deserving in the state and few in the nation more than what they do. And she has been a finalist for some of the National Council Awards. They have, all the family members have won all kinds of awards, but they have won local awards and state awards and a few
Wow.
national awards. But they are a tremendous family in this movement called mental health and mental illness.
Did they have a family member
Yes.
that?
Mhm. Yeah, and has been in recovery for now probably 27, 28 years, something like that. So yeah, that's what connects them here. Is one of those things. They were both educators. She has a master's in teaching. Dr. Shannon taught at the university, and of their two sons, one had his onset and break with schizophrenia, and she tells the story. So I'm not telling anything
Right.
that I can't.
No, I'm
Yeah.
understand.
She is. They use that as a lot of families, when that happens to their family member, they become kind of quiet and reclusive and embarrassed and ashamed and don't know where to find answers and try to cope as best they can, and they don't get a lot of outside support. The Shannons were just the opposite. They were one of those that said, okay, we got a hold of something now, let's figure this thing out. And in that role found that there's such a stigma around mental illness, and they have fought like just warriors to erase that through education and through a lot of trainings that they do and a lot of advocacy work they do. They found out that insurance company, there were parity issues where we'll fix everything in your body except for your brain. We're not going to put that on our insurance plans. And they knew how wrong that was, and have championed parity language in all of our bills, and certainly now under the Affordable Care Act, those benefits are there. And so we're trying to, and they have worked for a lifetime to bring mental illness out of a closet, so to speak. And they did that purposefully. And they formed the local NAMI chapter here in its inception in the mid-'80s. And then they've served in every formal capacity from local to state and to Jackie. And she was 3 times elected the chairman of the National Alliance of Mentally Ill on the national level.
Oh,
and
wow.
That's unprecedented. They'd never had anybody serve the presidency role 3 terms consecutively, and so they elected her in that regard. So they're well respected here, but that respect carries well beyond here. So she's done a lot of innovative things and a lot of good things. They just have big hearts.
That's wonderful. Well, you've been in the mental health industry, I guess you could call it, for how many years?
If we start with the broadest definition of that, we've got to go back to 1972. And as a student, I had the opportunity to work a summer at what we now call San Angelo State Supported Living Center. And the center had transitioned over 3 years previously from the tuberculosis hospital, McKnight Tuberculosis Hospital, and that's what brought us here. My grandparents were there to have their tuberculosis treated, and once they did, they stayed on and had a room and board and had jobs. And so when I was a kid, we just grew up outside, or I played outside of the fence. That was the tuberculosis colony there. And then when we eradicated tuberculosis and we needed to downsize, what a praise the Lord that was, and all of the health advances that we had. So the state had the available facility, and it was through a variety of things where we weren't building community services for people with intellectual disabilities yet, but we were building large institutions. And that was a time when we didn't have a community vision. We didn't have the resources dedicated to community, so we were building institutional care. People could either stay at home with their folks, or if they needed to, if they couldn't do that, they would go to a large institution. And so in '72, I started working there, and it was a time that we were building the institution bigger. And we did that till about the mid-'80s, and then community care came in, and so we began to downsize. So over the course of several years, I worked there in 3 separate times for 20 years, broke twice to go further my education outside of the immediate area, had done some here. And so that's kind of the scope, 20 years there. And then after leaving there, they came to work here and worked for 15 as the director.
So 35 years. You've seen a lot of changes
We have.
in mental health, and some areas are growing exponentially.
Right.
Autism,
Right.
suicide is growing, unfortunately, in our
Epidemic
community.
is what some call epidemic form at this point in time.
What epidemic being with both the autism or with the suicide?
Well, we would use, the way I've seen it written, Time Magazine and others, is that it's nationwide. The folks who are finding a place in their life where they live without hope, and there is no hope, and they believe that the only solution that they have is a viable one, is to take that permanent solution to whatever their temporary short-term problem is. So when we look at suicide and the rate of suicide, it is epidemic. We had the same epidemic 15 years ago when I got here, and few people realize that at that time, for those first three years, 98, 99, in that era, those 3 years, according to the Department of Health in the state of Texas, at that time out of 254 counties, we led death by suicide on a per capita basis. There's no place in the state of Texas that had a higher death rate than what we had. And so that was really problematic. And then comes this long story about Cliff Ritchie, who was in his time of battling depression and winning, and he said, I want to do something more for others. And then you had the Jackie and Charlie Shannons and others who really partnered together to do a community education, and that is when there's, when you run out of hope, there really is more hope. And let's tell you where those hope parts are today. We know there's many, but the West Texas Guidance and Counseling Center, who will be at the event tonight at the Convention Center. Dusty McCoy, a proud member of our staff for many, many years. When Samaritan had a desperate need and they were kind of at the low spot of their organizational history, Dusty said, I want to jump in, grab a hold of it, see if we can't make it better. Today he's got 16 licensed counselors who are doing tremendous work. And so, but how do you get, this is kind of how he and I discuss it, how do you get people, guys especially, how do you get the 20 to 50-year-old crowd to go to talk therapy, to have cognitive behavioral training? How do you get them to go into counseling and open up to what's causing their lack of hope and their despair? And it's really hard. And Dusty will tell you, if we can ever get them in the front door, the success rate is unbelievable. It's in the high 90s.
Really?
Yeah, if
Wow.
you can get them there, if you can get them into training or into therapy, the likelihood that they will then commit an act that grieves their family for years to come won't happen. And so that's the really great thing about some of the initiatives to educate, because you really want folks to reach out and get help before they pull the trigger or do whatever they do. Mm-hmm. And it's not always males, but it's the large percentage. And those guys, the younger guys will come into counseling, the older guys might come into counseling. But there's a kind of a tough me generation in there that is really hard to be able to do that. So in the mental health world, we use the word epidemic when the deaths by suicide outpace every other form of death that there is, and categorically how they lay it out. And there's some folks, when they measure it, they can take whatever's 2, 3, and 4, add them together, and they say our death by suicide is still greater than. And so in our field, we know that there is recovery. We know that there is help. We know that there are things that work, but you got to get those resources at that person when they need it. And there's an incredible link that we always are working on. And so we need to do better. Autism, you mentioned autism, that's a different subject.
Yeah, going back to the suicide, have y'all been able to find some things to help the folks get through that door?
Yes.
What are some things that are working?
Well, one of the things that worked 15 years ago, when Cliff Ritchie came out, he was #1 in the world in tennis. He and his sister Nancy, incredible human beings. They had a real passion for the game. He played, we when we introduce him at events, we've got clips of him playing Arthur Ashe and people that are just household names of that generation. Well, Cliff was in there, and at one point in time in world standings, was #1 on points totals. So when a part of our community comes out and says, I've been depressed, but I'm in the process of beating it, here's how, and we can get that word out, it resonates with a lot of guys because, think about it, a professional athlete, when their game isn't where it needs to be, they got coaches for everything. They got swing coaches, they got head coaches, they've got, muscle relaxing coaches, they got coaches for everything. What's your food intake, your diet, they got coaches for everything. So professional athletes understand the value of when your game isn't A+, you get help, you get a trainer, you get a coach, you get somebody. And so he's brought that kind of mentality into the mental health world to say to everybody. In fact, when we had the big event, he brought in Johnny Bench and Ed Marinero, and he brought in Jim McMahon, and he brought in Donnie Anderson, and just a whole bunch of the world's best. I mean, I go down the list. And they had a big event here, and we put a focus on it. Well, Kevin Berry was at the Standard Times at the time. Jackie was on our board, being a master educator. She was in charge of finding all of the different resources that were available. And our work with Kevin, he put 25, in a short window of time, just a few weeks, 25 major articles on mental health in the paper, and began to debunk the mystery around it. And we had TV commercials. I'm Cliff Ritchie, and hey, this is my story. And he could tell it in 60 seconds. Then he wrote the book called Acing Depression. And so there has just been a lot of strategies that we've used that we believed at that point in time were successful. And we got people in the community just talking about it. It was okay to talk about it. Because if a professional athlete's talking about it, the rest of us can talk about it. And we did that for, those rode us for a long time. But what we're finding, not just here locally, state and the national level, is that the numbers are going up exponentially again. So now it's a new strategy, a new set of strategies, new opportunities for us to take what's worked, we think, in the past and do it again. So the event tonight, you will see Cliff will be there, Cliff and Nancy. The Gatlins will be there, of course. They have a story, a compelling story to tell as well, of hope and recovery, which is phenomenal. They entertain, of course. And so, and then Dusty's group, who have 16 counselors, I mean, they're ready, willing, and able on a sliding fee scale to help anybody that they can get into the front door. So it's really, how do we use everything that we can just to get folks to go, you know what, I need to go over to Dusty's and I need to sit down and talk to somebody. And Dusty's just one example. There are other great counselors and counseling associations here in town. So just getting folks in the door, and that's the real key.
What can families do if they suspect that a family member is struggling and just not being real with themselves?
Yeah. That's on a national level. That's a discussion I even heard this morning on national TV, and that is if we notice family members who aren't doing well, how do we act and react? And we're blessed in our community. They're not perfect, but we're blessed in the fact that we have mental health deputies working for the Sheriff's Department, working for David Jones and his staff. Mental health deputies are highly trained. And so when somebody gets to a point in time that they're dangerous to themselves or potentially dangerous to somebody else, it's a simple call, to call 911, and it'll be dispatched through the police. But if a family member says, I've got this concern, then it will quickly be diverted to the mental health deputies, who will ask more questions and then have the ability to follow up and to have direct conversation with folks and make some determination. Now, the nice thing is they're not having to make the final determination. They're just a step in a cog in that wheel, because we also have a suicide crisis hotline. Avail Solutions is who we use locally. They're certified with the American Association of Suicidology. That phone call is available to anybody. It's easy to get through the MHMR website. It's immediately available. And so a family member could call there and talk to those folks, or they could have an individual call there, or law enforcement can call there. Well, it activates our mobile crisis outreach team, and that is a group of professionals, and they are 24/7 all the time. I mean, they're on all the time. There is somebody who can go anywhere. And if it's somebody that needs potentially to be inpatient, they may ask them to go to one of the emergency rooms locally, so that then there can be this connection with them and the family if they're willing to go. If not, then the mental health deputies can certainly be involved wherever they happen to be. So I'll just say, between our professional team and our hotlines and the mental health deputies, again, it's not an absolutely perfect system, but it is much better than most communities in Texas, and certainly many around the nation have. Because for our size, 100,000 population, for our size, we have more resources on the crisis piece where people don't know what to do. Now, the next thing that we are doing, and this has been one of the most exciting things that came out of this last legislative session, is that the legislature said, you know what, after Sandy Hook, and we had just the carnage that is there, wouldn't it be great if we could give our teachers some advanced training in mental health and then know where to turn in their local communities? So they've given us some grant money to teach and train teachers. And so we now have the capacity through the summer. We're working closely with Region 15 Service Center. They're setting up, Scott Goen and his staff, they're setting up trainings on a weekly basis for educators who want to come in. And it's interesting because the training is called Mental Health First Aid. So think about it. Many people have had their Red Cross training, so that if you see me having the big one, you have some sense about what to do. If you see me with an automobile accident, bleeding profusely, they teach you what to do in the short run. So on the physical aspect, when it comes to our breathing and our circulation and issues, many times we know what to do immediately and how to access help. But when you ask that same set of questions to somebody who's having, I found either a member of my family or a neighbor or somebody that I've just seen who's distressed psychologically, I don't know what to do, seems to be the common answer. So mental health first aid really is teaching the basics. You don't become a professional in the midst of it, but you know what to do, and you know where to call, and you know where the resources are.
How to identify.
How to identify. Those are critical components. And so that it's not, it stays largely in the shadows when we don't know how to engage it. And so it's an opportunity for folks to have a little bit more confidence to be able to make sure that they're asking the right questions, because everybody's been told, oh, don't ask the wrong questions because it could do more harm than good. Well, we don't know that that's necessarily the case, but in that training, our master trainers will teach folks what they can say and what not to say, and how to approach folks, and when to call for extra help, and those kinds of things. So that is an exciting piece, because most people, there's always the last person to have spoken to somebody before they do something that's irreversible. And so if all have an opportunity, or all of our community eventually, and our educators have a strategy that will work, then we think that the outcome will be significant, will be good.
Is there a potential that classes will become available for the community?
They are. They're currently available. Just calling through MHMR. If a church group wanted to do that, they could do it. If a civic group wanted to do it, if there's a group in a neighborhood that wanted to do it, there is, at this point in time, we have not turned down anyone who wanted to. So we have done all kinds of trainings already, from juvenile probation to the adult probation staff to, we can just go down the list of those that have already. Some of the counselors in San Angelo have already been through it. So if a group of us, whether it's small or large, wanted to participate in an 8-hour training, if you want the certified training out of Australia, the actual recognized training, it used to be 12 hours, now it's 8 hours, and we can do it in one day, or they can break it up into some smaller division, like 2 mornings or 2 evenings or whatever. So just know that it's out there and it's available, and it's available through MHMR.
Wonderful. A lot of people don't realize, you use the word epidemic, really how many suicides are happening in our community, because it's not front page news.
Yeah.
And it's
typically the paper won't put it in, the newspaper won't report it unless it's attached to something else. Their policy and their position has been that they don't report it as such. And so that becomes problematic in some ways, because people, they see that face in the paper and I don't know about you, but we're always looking for those secret codes. You know, if it says dedicated any funds to the American Cancer Society, then we usually extrapolate that that person must have had cancer and died from cancer, right? I mean, that's how we do it. Or it's the hospice. They have had some kind of terminal illness. But for those in our paper, because people are embarrassed and families are embarrassed by it, they don't usually lead off those stories, or they don't say and make donations to the American Suicidology so that we can help other people. That just doesn't happen. So consequently, we never, you know, the general public, if you're reading the obituaries faithfully every day, like people my age do.
Make sure we're not in there.
Yeah, exactly, we do that. Then there's always that question. Now, in our field, we do get a lot of additional information about people who aren't necessarily in our services. They have a mental illness that may not be schizophrenia, bipolar, major depressive disorder, but situational depression, and they may not have been, most of them are not in our services, because history says if you can get into MHMR and you're in our services and you'll be faithful to your treatment, the chances that you will commit suicide go down significantly less than the general population. But so how many do we have in our community? I would tell you that on average, we are looking at almost 2 per month on an average that we are aware of. Some, you know, you just don't know whether it was or wasn't. Certainly Eddie Howard and our Justices of the Peace, those guys, they're out there making those pronouncements and making those judgments in the field many times. So I do have a dream, and I paint it vividly, and have multiple times here lately at all kinds of groups, from the Rotary Club to Leadership San Angelo and others, and that I really have a dream. My dream is simple. My dream is that we can actually go in the Concho Valley 1 full month without any of our neighbors or friends committing suicide. That would be a first important step in success. I would love that. The idea of stringing several months together, we have never done it since I've been here 15 years. I would give anything if we can go for months without having one single suicide in our community, and for all the obvious reasons, and for the pain that it creates for families and such.
Do you think, I don't know, just thinking about just the information that I receive on a regular basis, because it's not talked about, and yes, y'all are out there and trying to open more doors and bring more awareness, but to me it still seems like on the whole, the majority of the population doesn't talk about this issue, and because of their lack of knowledge or possibly avoidance of the subject, it continues to, that's one of the reasons it continues to perpetuate.
Yes, exactly. One of the latest ideas that Cliff and I and Dusty have been working on for some time, Cliff Ritchie and Dusty McCoy, and that is, how do we get help and hope and the hope of recovery in every family unit? We know that there's 35,100 some odd homes in San Angelo proper. And how do we get something into everybody's hands? And so we have, Cliff has written one book called Acing Depression. We are considering, and he's been working with, about a 7-chapter scenario, 140 pages, that has an incredible local flavor to it, that then ties in the West Texas Guidance and Counseling Center and others in that kind of arena. Has excellent professional help, but also has the local resources that are available, and then a compelling reason as to why you would want to let this be the avenue to get you to where you need to be for some help. So we were talking earlier about some strategies. One of the strategies we're looking at is, how do you get 35,100 publications, small books, into every household in San Angelo? That's a stretch goal. I mean, that's like saying we want to drop 40,000 Easter eggs or something. I don't know. How do you get there from here? But you start out small. So we're working at this idea. We have now the books published and printed and delivered for $4 a household. And that is incredible. I'm talking about from written, final manuscripts, printed, in the mail, into your home for $4, something that would be of help. The big question for us from a research perspective is, just because I send you something that might help you, how do I know that as soon as you get it, you're going, don't know anybody like that, and just toss it over in file 13? Now, I feel better because I've tried to help, and I've gotten something to you. But at the end of the day, I'm more interested in the fact that you open it up, and if you have a situational depression today, or next week or next month or next year, that you'll see this as something, as a part of your strategy of hope. It is a part of whatever tool chest you use to get well, and can it function in that capacity. So we are currently about the business of exploring this as an option, of multiple options. I mean, the event tonight's Mental Health Awareness Month's a big event for that purpose and other purposes, but yeah, no, how do we develop and bring into community the best strategies we've got? You know, there's a lot of research being done currently on our new mobile devices. A lot of people will Google all kinds of things on their smartphones to find answers to questions. How many people, before they commit suicide, actually look for help on their smartphones? And so I know that there's some new applications being built that are disseminable to folks, that they have access to it. So would somebody go anonymously online to find resources that would help them in their time of need? And if that is true, then rather than putting the old-fashioned book in your hands, maybe it is smarter that we invest in building a great local app that we put up on every billboard. Download this app into your smartphone or your iPad, your iPhone, whatever it happens to be, and it will be there for you when you or your friends or your neighbors, family members have a need. So I know we're looking at a lot of strategies, and I think every community who recognizes the epidemic that we have in our communities are looking for solutions. I know we're begging for solutions, and we're begging for the dialogue and the discourse, and can we get from where we are to where we need to be?
Wow, I think your hunt for that answer is tremendous. So it sounds like while you may have relocated to Colorado, you still have some attachments on projects here.
I do, and my commitment to both Greg and Dusty and Cliff and the others, and tonight we'll hear from Max Parker, who is one who tells his own story. He's going to tell it again tonight. You look at the folks that are there, and the Gallons and others. For those of us who've been affected or nearly affected or been through our own depressed times, it is one of those kind of ventures. You don't take it just because you have the title of executive director. You take it because, just like they do, you have a great passion around something that's so important. When you go Hospice San Angelo and David McBride, what a great organization, what a great friend. They don't use the term epidemic, but they say we now have enough surviving spouses that they have created a specialty group just for the purposes of helping the men and women who are left from a relationship that was severed in that way. They have developed a special group just for those folks. Well, that will tell you that in their estimation, they're seeing more of it as well. And I'm just proud of them for stepping up. And I know it's brand new, and they have been only at it for a short period of time. But I think for those of us who watch this, it's really interesting to see what are we going to learn from the surviving spouses. And you know, Kubler-Ross has taught us the 5 stages of grief and how everybody has to go through those on any time that we grieve in any regard. But walking with some of those folks through that, and so that we can not only support them, but we learn from that, so that hopefully that gets just woven into whatever our community solution is. So, so the answer to your thought, am I totally gone? Absolutely not, because the mission is still as important as it ever was.
Wonderful. Suicide seems to be the topic that we're on. Is there a common factor that y'all are finding that is kind of the driving force that's pushing people that direction?
Yeah, that's a good question. 15 years ago, when we studied it intensely, 80% of those who were successful in committing suicide were males. Now, females attempted it more frequently, but the successful were the guys. And in West Texas, guns are lethal, and we're proud owners of those things. And the men are more likely to use those, so they were more successful. So 80% of the suicides that we had 15 years ago were males. When we looked at those, they spanned a variety of ages, but they had one common thing for most of them. There are those that would have been diagnosed with a disease that's incurable, or there could be some financial problems. But the majority of the men at that point in time, it was around a spurned love relationship. There was somebody that they really had a great affection for, could have been married to or dated or have a relationship with, a female. And when that love relationship was spurned, then they go through an immediate time of depression. And then out of that, there are those, the majority don't, but there are those that do then commit suicide in that deepest, darkest time that there is. So that was it, that then. That is not as vividly true now. And in fact, as we look at those families, we kind of back into what information we can get, that is still the case, but there's many other reasons too that people lose their hope. And it could be financial, it could be, I go through, the list of those things that are stressors for all of us. It could be losing a job, it could be losing a child, it could be losing a spouse. I just go down the list. So, but usually there's a loss, and there is situational depression, and they don't have the capacity to get past that. And so that's where talk therapy, and cognitive behavioral treatments come in, and that's where they work, because they can help you redefine and reset your thinking around things that are important and the relative worth to those, and how to get from where you are to where you want to be, because we all want to be healthy and whole and wholesome and quality of life and vibrant parts of our community, and not always taking in but giving back. And so when you look at the folks that have lost that hope, what would be the reasons? I guess it's about as varied as the potential things that would cause us to be depressed might be.
Does it seem like there's a certain percent of people that it is out of a response to a broken relationship or something like that, versus those that may have had chronic depression over a period of time?
Yeah.
Does one seem to be higher than the other?
I don't know the answer to that, but we do know that folks who have untreated chronic depression, they are going to be deemed with a higher potential acuity level in that regard. But what we do know is that those people who are known to be chronically depressed for a long period of time, if they get into treatment and they get the right treatment, the right medications if appropriate, and the right supports, they significantly reduce the likelihood that they're going to find themselves at the end of their rope. So I will say all the good things that people ought to be doing, they need to be doing those, and it will certainly, whatever they genetically get predisposed to, the likelihood will be brought down if they will do the things that we know right now work.
What is the thought on the quickest way to break that stigma of the shame and embarrassment of even going for treatment, or even for a family member going, well, we can't take them to Rivercrest or wherever for help or MHMR because what if it might cost them their job? All of the popular mindsets.
Yeah. Well, and that's the reason you can go to our website. Let's start off by going to our website. We have built an award-winning website at MHMR. We've built it with the purpose of educating people who may not want to go outside of their immediate comfort zone in themselves or their immediate family to ask for help. So let's go online. We don't have the smart iPhone techniques yet, but what we do have, if you go to the website, there's a little button up there that says topics. You click on topics, and the drop-down box has just a whole bunch of topics. You got a kid with ADHD, you've got a family member with Alzheimer's, you have somebody who's currently situationally depressed. You just go down the list and you will find, if you click on that, it'll open you up to a world of the latest, greatest research that is out there. And so it is wonderful because you can find online solutions and potential resolution to those issues, and tell you when to be more concerned or less concerned and how to approach it. So education is just the key, and in getting folks to educate. So if they won't come, understand, they won't just make a phone call and go to the Shannon Clinic. If they want to do it in the privacy of their home, we've made that available. And that's one of the strategies that, for us, it's like, how many times can you get your website out there? Well, until everybody has it memorized and they know to go there
And
first.
it is?
It is, yeah.
What is the website address?
MHMRCV.org, but it's easy enough to find. Just Google up MHMR Concho Valley and it'll immediately come up. You can't miss it. It's there.
Okay. You have a pastoral heart.
Yes.
And you've pastored several churches, and now that's what you're doing.
Right.
How has that calling in your life worked alongside with what you've done for the last 35 years with
Good
mental
question.
health?
Well, I think they go together quite nicely. When I got here, we prayed a lot because this place was a mess. And so we all say, man, we needed to start every day with a prayer meeting around here because we knew we weren't where we needed to be. We wanted to be something different. I think in ministry, or whether it is their salvation, or whether it happens to be whatever crisis that families face and individuals face, ministers are about the business of, I'm not the professional. I have LPCs, and I have doctors, and I have mid-levels, we have nurses. We have folks who are trained professionals in disciplines. Mine is a different role. Mine is much like the pastor. I want to hear just enough. Don't tell me too much detail. I want to know just enough where I might be able to, if you would follow my advice, send you in a direction, send you to somebody who is a professional. So for me, it's much like conducting. I love to go to the orchestra. I couldn't play a single instrument there, but let me tell you, when the conductor stands and he has passion for music and he is gifted in his own regard, and when he taps, 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 and the string has come alive, we all immediately get engaged with that. My role, whether it's a pastor, and it's the work that we do in the local church, or whether it's at MHMR, I find myself just tap, 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 getting the attention of folks, and then most importantly, allowing those who do what they do well to make it come together as a beautiful piece of music, a beautiful work. So for us, it's just getting the right clinicians with the people who need it, and making sure that all the moving parts are as seamless as they can be. We're still governmental, we're still bureaucratic, we still have folks we have to answer to, the taxpayers. We still get audited on site 14 times a year. We still are the most regulated of all industries. And you can let that create in you a real jaded heart, and say, well, because the state says, and then give an answer that's not appropriate. Or you can just say, we'll deal with all that. The most important thing is, how do you get people connected who really care about each other? So when you see the hugs and the smiles, and you see the shaking of hands, and you see people affirming what our staff do, to me, there's nothing any better than that. And so, whether you're the pastor of a church or you are the director at the MHMR, those are only different in shades.
Well said. What other areas of mental health are we having challenges with in our community that maybe the public's not aware of as much?
You mentioned earlier autism. We have a new project that the Archer Foundation funded to work with the school district locally, with San Angelo Independent School District. We have a partnership with them, the old San Jacinto Clinic. So we are developing very specialized autism services. The difficulty is there's a lot greater need out there immediately than we have staff, so we're having to ramp up to get closer to having enough staff for the needs that are presented because of the number of kids that have autism. And that number moves around a lot in terms of what's the percentage, one out of so many. But we know that the need is there in our community for very intense early intervention strategies for some kids. And if we can invest in them early and significant enough, it makes a difference for them, their families. And then if it's the taxpayers that are paying for it for a long time, it is a positive return on investment for all of us. So we're doing that. We know we need to treat more folks in the mental health community, so through 1115, that's another big thing. We're now moving our adult clinic to a new location that is owned by Shannon, recently remodeled.
1115? What is that?
That is a federal state partnership way to fund some new initiatives. So they've identified a problem. Let's say that the inappropriate use of the emergency room. We hear that all the time. People who are, they're not sick enough to go there, but where do they go? They show up in the emergency room. And we all then say, but why did they go there? That's the most expensive level of care that we have. Well, they don't have a primary care doctor. They have no other intervention strategies. They wait till they get so sick, and then they just show up at the emergency room because they know they can't be turned away, and they may not have to pay anything if they go. The rest of us pay a lot of money for those interventions. So that's a problem. Federal government said, we understand that's a problem. If you'll come up with some good strategies, then we will give you some incentive funds in this partnership with Medicaid and the indigent to get us to get some good strategies so that we can lower the overall health care costs. So I think the goal is worthy. We have three goals. That's that's just one of the things that we're trying to accomplish. There's other things, but you know, we're expanding our services, both for our children and our adults. We're bringing primary care into our clinic. We know that about half of the folks that we serve with severe mental health issues, the most debilitating, they just won't go to the doctor, the primary care. They may come to us for their mental health treatment, but they're not going to be. So we'll help them with that. We're going to bring primary care into our clinic. We're putting the head and the body back together. So if they suffer from diabetes or hypertension or any number of other things, we're going to help them manage that. Because we do know that the people that we serve, severe mental illness, again, with schizophrenia, bipolar, major depressive disorder, they die on average 25 years younger than the average. So if the average death right now for all Americans is 75, then they're going to die at 50 on average if you have one of those diagnoses. But what's interesting, it's not because of one of those big three diagnoses, not because of their mental illness, it's because they have something else wrong with their body that they also don't, many times, fail to recognize, and certainly don't take the precautions and take care of themselves the way they should. So we think that by bringing primary care in the clinic, that's a good thing. The other is, in our community, we're blessed with the group homes for folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we have, per capita, in that funding stream, we're second only to Brownwood out of the whole state of Texas. So we're really fortunate to have a lot of group homes, a lot of folks with disabilities who live in the small group homes all over Tom Green County and the surrounding areas. And but many of them lose their community placement, have to go back to the large institutions, which is the most expensive of all living arrangements, largely because of either behaviors or because of psychiatric issues. So 2 years ago, we introduced Dr. Mercer to we have now the Mercer Clinic. And Dr. Mercer was previously the medical director at the state hospital, has a vast background on both mental health and what we used to call mental retardation, intellectual disabilities. And so we have created a clinic here so that folks who get into trouble can see him the next day. And so he has about 300 people that are in his clinic, and that clinic will take the place of, when we move our adult clinic to the Shannon facility at the corner of, you gotta follow this, Main and Coberland, then that opens up the other clinic. We're gonna remodel it, take Dr. Mercer's clinic over there, and it will include 5 respite beds, so that if people need to have a stay away from home or from their home or their family, you know, things can melt down and we gotta have a place to go, then we're gonna create that for them. So that's another one of our of the 3.
That doesn't exist now, does it?
Yeah, we started, parts of it do. Dr. Mercer's on staff. We have staff around him. We're building
But as
our
far as the
processing.
respite care?
No, that will start in about another month to 6 weeks. As soon as the other clinic gets moved out, then we'll do that one. So, I mean, those are just some of the examples. We've got 10 major projects underway. Our budget at the MHMR has moved from $8 million to $11 million in the last year. We're excited because we've never had a time of growth in our center, and that's statewide. In our centers, we've never had a period of growth as substantial as we're seeing right now. Bits and pieces over time, little parts here and there, but this is significant. And these are new initiatives, new funds. It's nice to have the federal government sending money to help with these projects. It's also nice that the state of Texas, we're living in a time that the oil and gas revenue is helping all of us in all the different things that we do, not just from making sure that we have water and appropriate transportation and education of our kids, but in Texas supporting the health system so that those of us who treat people who are indigent and meet qualifications, that they get some level of service, an effective level of service with good outcomes.
This overall growth, do you think that it's either that the demand is growing, or that the awareness of help is there now and so more people are coming in? Which?
Yeah, I think we've known for a long time that the amount of money that we had to do here at the center, if everybody who had a mental health diagnosis that qualified or had intellectual and developmental disability, if they all showed up, we wouldn't have enough room for everybody. We didn't have enough funds. We're funded in many ways a little different. Like in the school district, if you have 50 kids that show up, you get funds for 50 kids. You have a base funding plus the weighted average daily attendance. But if 75 kids show up next year, there is a way for the school district to get a little more money to take care of those other 25. In our system, that's not the way it works. And so we get funded with contracts with the Department of State Health Services, let's say for 500. Well, if 600 show up, I either have to figure out how to squeeze those 100 in, or I have to put them on waiting list and tell them to wait until somebody else leaves. And so unfortunately, I can just tell you, if we take just rough numbers, if we took just the percentage of people with severe mental illness that we know nationwide that would qualify for our services, on any given day, I can only serve 50% of them that qualify in our community. So I just know that the need is always greater than the capacity. It's been that way for a long time. We do lean on other partners. There's other places in town that we would refer folks for some temporary short-term type of help. After they've been in our system for a while, if they are doing well and can then move to another level of care somewhere else, it may not need quite the intensive care. That's another one of the strategies. So we're always working to try to figure out you know, how many folks can we put into our services. And I'll say our center has excelled in not only serving the minimum that's been expected, but we've always been able to add other folks in and let them into our services, and they get the full array of services. And so as a taxpayer, you can be proud of that, because we don't stop just this is what the state pays for and that's all we're going to do. Our board has always looked at us and said, do all that you can do without causing yourself harm or jeopardy. And so we've always been able to do that. There have been times that we've had to put people on, depends on which program they want, waiting list. Some have a long waiting list, some have short waiting lists, some have no waiting list. So it really depends on the level of need, what they want, what they qualify for, and then we'll make that determination and help them to know if we can't, who can.
What percent of our population here in Tom Green County is affected in some manner by some type of mental health?
You know, the National Alliance of the Mentally Ill, who know this better than most of us, they would say if you took the broadest definitions of mental illness, mental health, then they would say 1 in 5 in their lifetime are going to have some issue. It could be situational depression, but they're going to have something that they could sure use some support from somebody else for a period of time. No longer than they need to, but for a period of time. So if it's 1 in 5 that are going to be affected, then that's a pretty healthy number. In our community, in their lifetime, you know, if we have 100,000, we can say that 20,000 sometime in their lifetime are going to need support. Some need it every day from day one for a long time, wherever their break is for a long time. Others don't need it for that. They need it for a window of time, and they get past that, and they figure out where recovery is. And for some people, the new normal. What is new about life now? And you're redefining that and getting some cognitive training about how to reset our life and our expectations and our hopes and our dreams and what's realistic. And so with that, that's a lot of folks. And that's the reason it takes all of us who do what we do working together to make it happen. Because, you know, the last thing, let's say you go for many years and you don't need anything, but the day you need it, you need it. And when you need it, where is it available to you then? And that's critical, because you know, you may not have cared the last 20 years, but when that need comes, you need to know where that need can be met. And so that's it's the more resources you have in the community, the greater the opportunity you got folks to get plugged in where they need to be.
What percent of that would be the chronic that are going to be
Usually
lifelong?
Usually about 3% is about where that is. The very severe schizophrenia is a very difficult disease. Bipolar major depressive disorder. Those, you know, if it's 3% on the schizophrenia, much like we used to say mental retardation on the MR side. Now we call it the IDD side. You know, that's about 3% of our population. And the beautiful thing for that 3% is we have said that other 97%, guess what? We're going to support you. You know, God may have gifted you this way with Down syndrome, but as a society, we are benevolent. And one of the things that we want to do is to help the family. Some families don't need the help. They don't want the help. I respect them for that, but many do. And for those that do, the rest of the 97% have said, we'll take part of our tax-paying dollars and we're going to help you support this loved one throughout their lifetime. Not all, but many. And so, you know, it's a part of who we are as a people. I think we can be proud of that as Americans. I think we think that it's important. Same thing with those who are severely mentally disabled with schizophrenia or one of the others for periods of time. The difference is there is hope in recovery, in many of those, just like with the Intellectual Developmental Disabilities group, there are people who have great skills, they have great abilities, they have great assets, they have much to give back to society if you can get the right supports around them. And they love to do it, and we want them to. Same thing with people who are chronically mentally ill. Many of them can live a quality of life and work jobs and do the kinds of things that all the rest of us have, relationships, the things that we think are important. So, but when they are at the bottom of the barrel, when they're hurting, they need somebody. And we as a society have said, hey, local MHMR Center, that's your job.
Cool. What, you mentioned the SAISD and working with the schools. What else have you seen over the last 15 years that the public schools or any of the private other schools that may be doing something, that they've been able to begin working with people with special needs?
You know, the schools, Jana Anderson, who works for Dr. Bonds in the San Angelo Independent School District, it's beautiful because she brings that perspective into our board via the Planning Network Advisory Committee. That's one of the advisory committees to our board. They meet quarterly and she chairs that group. And so it's really nice because we get always a fresh perspective from her of what the district can and can't do and where the opportunities are for us to make things better, and it's really good. And we have a second part of that is that Mark Williams over at the Juvenile Probation Department, he is also on our Planning Network Advisory Committee. So it's a think tank of great professionals who come together. As we know, the kids outside of the district kids, let's go to Mark's kids over at Juvenile Probation, a large percentage of those kids that end up with him have some type of need, mental health need to be met. And so he contracts back with us to bring professional help over to support his staff when they need it with some of those kids. So it's just another one of the many partnerships that we have, just like we have with adult probation or the ladies facility out on the east side of town, the CRTC, and others. And even the jail, we have staff that are down there every day. Because we know that law enforcement and mental illness, there's a great intersect at times when people just don't have the right insight and they get in trouble with the law. And so we all prefer treatment over incarceration unless they've done something that's so bad that we really can't afford that option. But for all, treatment is a much better option, and that's something that our community has embraced. When you look at jails today, I don't know how I got from kids in school to jails, but let's make the leap with me here. In jails, when you look at the number of people who end up in jail with mental illness, that percentage is really high, and an untreated mental illness most of the time. So for us, part of the strategy for years with the mental health deputies and our local funds to buy beds at Rivercrest and Shannon Behavioral for people who are indigent who would otherwise go to jail, to buy those beds for them to be in those facilities. It's really been wonderful because what it does then is it frees that jail bed up. We have a little over 400 beds down at Tom Green County Jail. And it used to be that on any given day, in community centers like ours, up to 25% of the adults were in somebody's jail. They were in their services. We were able to move that all the way down to 1%, so that if we serve 500 people, we only had 5 on average actively in our system in the jail. So I've always said to the commissioners, and they understand this math equation here, that if that is true, if we don't have 100 people down there, but we only have 5, then that frees up a lot of beds that they can do otherwise with, or most importantly, they don't have anybody in, and it saves the county a lot of funds. So when you look at the Commissioners Court, what they've done for MHMR as one of our sponsoring agents, they have done yeoman's work in making sure that we have adequate funds from the county funds, the local funds, to support what we do, because they understand that there is a cost-benefit analysis not having them in jail, but having them in treatment, which costs less at MHMR.
So when they pick up somebody that is exhibiting some type of mental health, do they call y'all in or someone
Yes.
to the jail, and then what's the process from there?
Well, typically, if the mental health deputies are already involved, there's an intervention that happens before they end up in jail. We do go see folks in jail because they may have gotten there, but if there's any way for them to get into treatment before they end up in jail, the last thing we want to do is incarcerate people who are acting out of their mental illness when they need treatment. They don't need to simply be locked away in a jail. And I think we all appreciate that. Now, it gets really difficult when you start trying to work out the details of that, but in our community, we have embraced treatment over incarceration. If we can get them into treatment, and we think that that's appropriate, we have multiple levels of intervention of treatment that we can get them engaged in, and we're blessed here to have that, then that may keep them out of the jail. Some folks do end up in jail, and we do go see people in jail, and we do evaluate people that are in jail, and some of the folks who end up in jail do get some level of services. But our goal is, if we can at all get them into treatment, that's our first stop.
To what level of understanding or knowledge do you have of the prison system, and how many of the inmates that are statewide or federal in our state are suffering with untreated mental illnesses?
The percentages are high, and there have been a number of studies that have been done by a number of institutions, and I don't know what the latest figures are, but we always know that they're substantial, and that there's a lot of folks that end up there. And if you have a mental illness and it's untreated, then certainly there are people who do the kinds of things that will land them in those facilities. So, you know, for us, like with probation, we have a very aggressive department that works when they get into probation to make sure that we marry up a probation officer and a mental health professional during their time of their probation, and making sure that they go to the treatment and get the treatment that they need. At the end of the day, one of the difficulties that all of our families express, or the vast majority, is that you know, this is a voluntary system, and so when you come to the community center, it's voluntary. You can't force people to be here. We use every way we can to convince them that this would be a good idea for them, and that can be the law enforcement, it can be the judges, it can be doctors, it can be nurses, it can be our staff. And we're always about the business of engaging people and trying to really do our best to let them know that this is in their best interest. Please come with us, and we'll walk with you, and we'll work with you and give you no more, no less than what you need. But at the end of the day, some people walk away, and they walk away for all kinds of reasons, and they don't get the immediate help that is available to them, that they are qualified for, that the rest of us have said we'll help pay for if you'll just go. And so we do have those that are in and out of treatment. They're compliant, non-compliant with their medication. One of the most fascinating studies has been a number of years ago that said that even people who do come to our clinic regularly, only half the time are they med compliant if they take medications. Well, look at the general population. I took my meds this morning, and I've got little pill bottles at my age now. They say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I try to faithfully take them because I know it's in my best interest, and my high blood pressure won't go through the roof, and I won't have a headache. Okay, so I know to do that. But on any given day, any of the medications that any of the physicians give us, people either take them or they don't take them. They either forget to take them or they purposely don't take them. Well, it's no different in our arena. It's just that sometimes the consequences are a little more significant than they might be otherwise. And so, you know, we do our best to encourage people to take their medication. If it's prescribed by a physician or one of our mid-levels, do take that medication and stay consistently on that medication. And that will go a long way to helping them get to the recovery that they want.
So you were mentioning funds. So if somebody is in need, and one of their hesitations might be, oh, I can't afford services.
Sure.
Y'all can assist with that.
Yeah. You know, in Texas, we haven't rolled out the Medicaid expansion program yet. We may, where most of the adults that we now serve will be on the Medicaid program. We don't think that'll happen anytime in the short order, but I know the federal government has incentivized states to want to do that. So many states have. In the meantime, Texas pays for both the ones that we have now and a part of the others, because we're all sending up our federal taxes. It's just that those funds aren't coming back to us. I think that we have a group of people working on that to try to come up with a Texas solution, and I applaud them. I hope that they can come up with something that will work for us. But in the short run, the answer is yes. The state of Texas has dedicated funds to us for people who have no funding source. They have no Blue Cross and no Blue Shield, no Medicaid, no Medicare. They're totally indigent. And so our population, our mission is people who are either in the Medicaid population or those who have absolutely nothing whatsoever in terms of, if they have the ability to pay a little bit, we ask them to pay a little bit. But the majority have, on the assets test, and when you look at what their income is, you know, it doesn't even hit the chart. So we take every available fund. We have 76 different payers who bring it all together here to create the level of care that we do today. And we'll touch, this year we'll hit, in the mental health side, 1,500 adults and children and the people with IDD with mental illness. We'll hit our zenith point this year. We'll serve more people. We now have 7 clinicians, and that's the most we've ever had in this community center since I've been here in 15 years, and I think it predates me a long time as well. So right now I have 3 physicians and 4 mid-levels, and they're seeing people all day long, every day, plus all the other support staff around them is the best we've ever been.
Is there any reason someone should not call for help?
The ones who should not call would really be if you have a private payer source, if you have Blue Cross Blue Shield or Aetna or TRICARE, if you have one of those and you can find in the private sector someone who would support you and help you, a physician, if you can get that through your primary care physician or referral, or you can get that directly yourself with one of the psychiatrists in our area, I would encourage you to do that because I don't have capacity to take care of the mission we've been given, which is the indigent, Medicaid, and everybody else that has a need that may have a payer source. So a lot of those, in psychiatry, it's not one of the best reimbursed fields that we have in healthcare. So those people who are in private practice, they need, in order to stay in business doing what they're doing, they need the best payer sources to go to them. The Blue Crosses or the TRICAREs, they need to go there. So we encourage people with resources to go to private physicians if they can do it, and then that opens up and allows us to do the mission that we've been called to do, which are for those, the least of these who may not have the benefits.
Very good. Closing comments, or if somebody's listening to this video and they need help, what would you say to them?
Oh, please call. Put all the embarrassment aside, pick up the phone, and if you are at this moment in desperate straits, just call one of the hotlines. You can find them anywhere. You can look into the phone book under MHMR. There's a hotline number that's there. You can call those. You can call for help in many different ways. Reach out to somebody, a family member, a loved one, law enforcement, go to the emergency room. Do something. Find somebody that you can grab a hold of and let them cry with you on your shoulder and embrace each other and say, we're going to walk together, and find a place to begin that walk. There's so many ways that you can get into care in our community. Just take the step, and that's the thing I would say. Take a step. Be courageous. Get out there. Know that help is there. It may be a little embarrassing for a while because our community doesn't make it otherwise, but just know you'll get way past that on down the road if you just reach out and take a step and just keep hope alive.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kat.